Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, episode 107.
Wireless LAN Professionals is a place to educate, inform, encourage, and entertain those involved in wireless LANs. This Wireless LAN Professionals podcast is an audio manifestation of these goals. Our host is a wireless LAN veteran, consultant, designer, and teacher, Keith Parsons. And now, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals.
Today, our first part of this episode is an interview I did with Karol Krol on their AirMobile app. Pretty cool thing there. If you have Windows or Android devices, it's a great way to find out what the driver is actually thinking and figure out how it's making its decisions. Next interview is with our favorite Revolution Wi-Fi, Andrew Vanage, about his updated Capacity Planner. It's now Capacity Planner 2.0. And finally, we have a 10 talk with Donal from Budapest, I think was when it was, on verifying a candidate's wireless skills and some techniques he uses to do that. Enjoy the show.
Main session.
Welcome. Keith Parsons back here. I'm in Stockholm today, part of a little whirlwind Scandinavia tour, doing some training in all these countries. And I happen to be here with some guys from AirMobile. Hello.
Hello there.
Karol.
Yes.
How do you pronounce your last name?
Krol. Yeah, that's difficult.
Krol.
Yeah. Krol. Almost now.
I know, but it sounds better when you have your accent there on it.
Right.
Anyway,
Thank you.
We're here and wanted to talk to you a little bit about, you've been involved in Wi-Fi for quite a few number of years. You have some very cool tools. You presented at WLPC Budapest and in Berlin. So just a little history of your company, where you come from, what's your product do?
Right. Thank you. So yes, Wi-Fi, it's been a while. In that way or another, I think it became year 2000. And then it kind of evolved, and now it's AirMobile for the last couple of years. What we do, we offer services like consultancy services. We do test products. We help companies stream their network. And then in this process, we realized we need a new tool. It wasn't out there. We tried different things, and we realized that you need to know what clients are doing, the Wi-Fi clients.
So you're saying there was no tool available that lets you see inside the client driver?
Right. For instance, I mean, you know yourself, you can have a packet capture, you can have sensors, but still, a lot of those decisions are client-based, and you don't know what they're doing, and you don't know if they fail or it's the network that's failing. You know, there can be a lot of reasons, a lot of things that can go wrong. So we wanted to include the client inside the measurement loop, and hence we got the AirMobile product.
So what's the secret behind that works, if you can tell us the secret? How do you get inside the client's decision-making process?
Well, we're not really doing it. We're just trying to see what they're doing. We're trying to do two things, actually. So one of them is verifying connectivity by sending simple pings to two destinations. One would be the near end, say your router, the for gateway. And the second one would be a far ping. What can this be? Could be your critical server, could be Google, whatever. So, and at the same time, you would measure radio low-level stuff like signal strength, like neighbor access points, like channel quality, signal quality. So you could then try to correlate the data. If your ping times the round trip times are really bad, you can see, right, because the signal strength went down, but maybe it wasn't this. You could try to find the reason. Maybe I should be roaming. The client should be roaming, but it didn't. There was loads of other. That's a typical thing, like sticky client. A perfect tool to find a sticky client, for instance.
So if this is a agent you put on the client?
Yeah, that's an agent. You put in a client. We have agents on Windows. We have agents on Android as of today. And we're planning to address some other operating systems in the future.
So the agent, is it tied to a specific firmware version number on that client?
Well, no, it's actually very generic.
Does the agent track the version number?
Yes, it does. It does now. So you can tell that this is what's happening.
So you can do a before and after, old firmware, right. New firmware, see Correct. If it fixed the problem.
Exactly. So you could get your stats, say last week we were running this firmware and the next week we're getting the new one. and compare them. Sometimes could be worse actually if you're upgrading. But you've probably seen that
You
yourself.
probably want to do the test first to find that out.
Right, that would be wise.
So where does this data go? It's generated in an agent on a client. Does it have some scheduler that does a certain period of time?
Right. That was just about it when we began, but later on we soon realized there's a lot of data. We need a server with some sort of visualization, just nice GUI, where you can plot and put things into tables, and this is where it's going. So these agents would default once a minute, talk back home and say, look, this is a new data coming in. And then you can slice the data on a server. That would be a web interface.
So the resulting data from all this agent traffic is up to some cloud someplace you can track.
It could be a cloud. We could host it. It could be your own server if you feel for it. Some of our customers
cloud is
do
just
that.
somebody else's computer.
Yeah, general. Yeah.
Is it my cloud or your cloud?
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. So that sounds like a great product for some customers. What kind of customers have went on board with this tool?
Right.
AirMobile, right?
Right, AirMobile, yeah. Well, yeah, that's true. I mean, we have found a sweet spot for those that view the Wi-Fi network as extremely critical. All type of production environment would fit that description, actually. When some of the clients stop, the whole production line stops, that would be the first one there. We have clients in mines, in the production mentioned, say, in hospitals, when you have a number of important clients, Wi-Fi based still. So you would like to know if they fail, when they fail, how often, how could we kind of map it and avoid it in the future.
So how can it, say I'm a mine and I have some process flow that if something stops, all the trucks stop, I'm losing 10,000 a minute or something. How can this information you gather help them save money?
Well, it actually is different. In some cases, you can just realize it's a wrong driver, back to the old one. Or you can try to... we had customers that couldn't really fix it by driver. They were just doing like workaround solutions. But they know, okay, if this happens, I can trigger this workaround solution. So we're giving them, opening their eyes, really.
So how close to real time is this data they're receiving?
Well, I mentioned 1 minute delay, which is kind of because how the system is set up. And then the data, normally what we do is every 5th second. So yeah, the worst case 1 minute. Does
it put much load on an additional load on your network to track
very
this?
very little actually. That's just the pings when you do it twice. When you do it 2 pings every 5th second, that's not gonna ruin your network. No.
Great. So what are your plans for AirMobile moving forward?
Well, we have some interesting things that we plan to release towards the end of the year, and it's something to do with speed testing. So the throughput testing, which would definitely make our product more attractive, and maybe sort of addressing wider audience.
So right now, how do people get a hold of AirMobile? Is it you sell it through resellers, sell it direct through disties? What's the process?
Both, actually. We have a number of resellers. We've been historically quite active in the Nordics, but we would probably invite you to talk to us directly at first, and then we could either do it directly or direct you to a reseller.
So say I'm have a friend. If I am at a hospital and I have thousands of clients and thousands of APs, is this something I need to put on all of my clients, or is it just would I have like a subset that I would move it around to test different scenarios?
Right. Yeah, that would be the subset probably. I mean, you could do it. Nothing is stopping you from doing this on each and every client. But I think what we realized with all those tests and all those installations, you'd be probably quite okay in having a subset, say 5 to 10 devices of a certain type, because you could see that they are behaving similarly. But again, of course, nothing would stop you from getting in on all of these clients.
So there's a whole other type, genre of support in Wi-Fi. Today we have things like NetBees or 7Signal or Cape Networks, where they have a sensor network that's kind of babysitting and watching your Wi-Fi. How does AirMobile compare to those?
Right. So yeah, that's exactly. We're including the actual client. So the actual client is a part of our test. And when you have a sensor, you could perfectly trim your network, but then you still don't know how your clients would react, how they would thrive in this network. So that's the difference. So that's the real thing.
So is this complementary to one of those sensor networks, or do you get information off of this that you could help also tune your network?
Right. Of course. I mean, effectively, you could. You find a problem is on your client, for instance. You could then tune your network to sort of be, reacting to this problem in a better way, or prohibit this problem from happening. But yeah, that's a complementary. I don't think very much of an overlap of all those sensors-based products you mentioned.
One's tuning your network. You're saying let's look at it from the client standpoint.
Right.
And you currently have they're not drivers, they're agents on Android and Windows.
Correct.
Which versions of Windows? Even Windows
7. Mobile? No. That's close, but not there. So I believe it's even actually Vista upwards to Windows 10, but effectively Windows 7. Nobody uses Vista nowadays, right?
Windows CE, yeah.
Yes, we've made a lot of trials there, and we almost have something there. I think it's more of we can do it if we find a right customer to try it with.
So if you're worried about clients, you've tuned your network as much as possible. AirMobile is a solution where you can say, okay, it's not my network, it's tuned as close. Let's see what we can do. Do you have any of your customers who take that AirMobile data and respond back to the vendor saying, fix your firmware?
Oh, yes. But then again, my limited experience says it's a difficult process because you normally couple instances back from your vendor. I mean, you could go to a vendor, which has to go to a vendor, which has to go to a vendor, which then goes to a chip manufacturer that can fix it. And that's normally a long process, and it's a very painful process. So you try.
But they need data. At least we have some data here to support it.
Of course, that's true. But then a lot of our customers just realize, they try to get some other workarounds, which most of the cases is the solution, actually.
So what else do you do here in Sweden? I hear you have other things you do, like classes?
Oh, yeah, we do. We do have, well, as I said, it's all about, it's kind of Wi-Fi focal point for Wi-Fi activities. So we have classes, we have consultancy business, and that's actually our sister company, 7 Lab, and some people might kind of mix the two.
So AirMobile, 7 Lab, same but different.
Right. So just to clarify, 7 Lab is the consultancy services, trainings, and test products for Wi-Fi, and the product itself, AirMobile, it's a company itself. They're housing the product, so to speak.
So, final question here: if you could change one thing in the way 802.11 works, what would you change to make all of our lives better?
That's difficult. I don't know. Right away, maybe kind of channelize 2.4 gigahertz with smaller channels. Maybe 5 megs, 2 megs, something like this. It wasn't a plan, but then some people left it out.
And there's, I would agree with
you.
For IoT,
I was thinking,
you don't need those big channels, and we only have 3 to play with. What if we had 30 to play with and they're little?
Right.
Yeah.
And because that's more than they need, these devices. But there's probably other things that one could think of. But I
put you on the spot there asking that big question.
I didn't know. I didn't see it coming, right?
Well, thanks for your time. I appreciate your time. And how would someone get in touch with you?
Well, the best way is the email, karol@airmobile.se. It would be the best way, really. And, the company's on Twitter, not me personally. So AirMobile on Twitter, yes, you could do that. So me and one of my colleagues would answer.
AirMobile.se?
AirMobile.se, right.
Yeah. Well, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Pleasure is mine.
Tools Review.
Hello. Back again. This is Keith Parsons. I'm doing a review of different tools that I use as a wireless LAN professional. And the one I'll be talking about today is a tool. It's actually an app called AirTool. It's from Adrian Granados, same guy who brought us Wi-Fi Signal and Wi-Fi Explorer Pro. AirTool is the simplest way to capture Wi-Fi frames to Wireshark on Mac OS. Now you can save it to other things as well as Wireshark, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But basically, it's a way to control the Mac OS's NIC so you can save all the frames. Sure, now anyone can go and download and run Wireshark on a Mac. All you have to do is go download it. It's at wireshark.org/download.html. You can go pick up your own copy. Highly recommend you do it. But if you want real full control over your captures, like changing link layer options, or perhaps wanting to change the channels or the bandwidth or which bands you happen to be listening on, then this free tool might be just the thing you're looking for. Now note, if when I said link layer header types, that got you a little confused. Adrian has been kind enough to write a blog post that explains each of the different types of link layer header types. There's a 802.11 plus radio tap header, 802.11 alone, 802.11 plus AVS radio information header, and there's even a raw IP header type that we can save these as. So if that was a little confusing to you, just go out to Adrian Granados' blog. It's under link layer head types. There'll be a link in the show notes as well. So you can take this AirTool and have it capture all 2.4 gig frames, all 5 gig frames, or both. Or, of course, with any other tool Adrian's put together, you can configure your custom channel plans as well. You can actually pick, if you want it to go 1, 5, 13 in some order. Those are all available for you, how you do it. In the configuration files, you can also configure how long you want it to dwell on each channel. Now remember, if you're doing packet captures and you are changing the channels, if you're dwelling, say, 250 milliseconds on each channel, you will be collecting a statistical sample, but not an actual, you're not getting every single frame on every single channel. This is only using the single NIC that's in a Mac OS, so it doesn't have the ability to do multiple links like you might do with an OmniPeak kind of multi-adapter. This is to do a roaming instead. Now, if you've collected data, all of the frames using AirTool, it allows you to automatically save or even open into Wireshark or OmniPeak or Wi-Fi Explorer. You can also connect the output and have it head over to either CloudShark or Mojo Packets if you're using either of those for further analysis. So if you need to capture, analyze Wi-Fi frames, if you have a Mac OS device, you need this app. To find it, head over to Adrian's website, and there's this tool plus other ones. This one happens to be free, but please be supportive of all of Adrian's work. He's really looking out for the wireless LAN professionals out here and building things for our community, tools that we need and love. And that's adriangranados.com. And if you need any more details, I'll put some links in the show notes for the help file and how to get to Adrian's site. So again, AirTool, it's a free tool. If you're running a Mac, you really need this tool on your machine. Thanks.
WLAN Interview.
Welcome. This is Keith Parsons, and I'm with Andrew, also known as AVN, Vanagi. How do you say your last name?
Andrew Vanage.
Vanage. But it's got that GY on the end. How does that turn into an Aj anyway?
It's tricky for Americans. Let me tell you, if I go over to Europe and the European, they don't have any problem with this.
Yeah, but then again, they pronounce OUI as we. Like, how do they do that? So I'm glad it's Vanage, and it works well. So welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we need to talk about your new update to the capacity planner. But to preface that, I wanted to just ask you a question about Revolution Wi-Fi. How did you come up with that name for your blog and your Twitter handle?
Oh, boy, you're testing my...
It's going in the way back machine there.
Yeah. Well, I know that the background was I was studying for my certifications in CCIE and CWNE back in the 2009 timeframe, and I wanted to create a blog to, as most people or a lot of people create blogs, just to take notes and for self-study reasons. And there wasn't a huge Wi-Fi community at that point, and Twitter was fairly new. And side note, I had no interest in Twitter. I was like, that's kind of stupid to follow, entertainers and things. And so I was just trying to come up with something, and I'm like, well, Wi-Fi is pretty important. It's causing a lot of disruption for businesses, and for whatever reason came up with Revolution Wi-Fi. I have no idea. And actually, some of my colleagues and acquaintances kind of gave me some crap for it initially because it was kind of just a weird name.
It's that communist red star that's doing it.
I have a blue version as well, so I can always put the blue version up.
Yeah, I've seen. Well, I went, oh, okay, I get that.
My brother's a graphic artist, and he made two versions for me. And for whatever reason, I decided to slap up the red one first, and it kind of stuck. And because my old original color scheme on the blog was blue, and then I switched to red just to kind of switch it up, so it kind of just stuck.
Well, that's kind of nice having a graphic designer in the family.
Yeah, he does. He's pretty talented. He has the creative bone in his body, which I do not.
Well, you have other things that you're really good at. So I like there has a little log periodic antenna right in the middle of it as well.
Yeah, I asked him to work in an antenna, and somehow he came up. So I gave him some just different antenna styles, and I think the one that one came out of was like a Yagi, and he kind of just incorporated it into the star logo, and then he gave it to me, and we put it up, and then I started getting feedback of, yeah, that looks very like militaristic, and I'm like, well, it kind of does.
And with the word revolution next to it, but it's okay.
Yeah.
We love your blog. It's been around for quite some time. One of the best ones out there. Well, the capacity planner has been a staple for many of us for doing testing and planning for a long time. You've just recently updated it to the 2.0 version. What was some of the impetus behind that?
So the first version was very analytical in nature, right? So it breaks things down for you in a very numerical format to look at numbers. But unfortunately, for a lot of people, I work well with numbers and intuitively process them, but some people don't. They process information in other ways. One of those being very visual, graphical types of analysis that really help people digest information. So one of the big impetuses behind that was to do something similar to what I did with the SSID overhead calculator, which was start to graphically represent things for people, which I did in the overhead calculator with just different shadings in the cells to highlight what's good to bad and things like that. So one of the big features in version 2 is the visualizations and the graphs to just slice and dice the data in different ways to show you, how the capacity is being used and what the efficiency or airtime utilization looks like from a graphical point of view. So I'd say the graphs and the visualizations are one of the big additions, and to really help not only administrators understand the data, but also then to take visual data that they can then embed in other reports or presentations to their management to help persuade and influence where their business needs to go.
I noticed you also added PDF reports that just drop right out. Makes it much easier for a lot of people to use.
Yeah, so I wanted to educate the majority of the Wi-Fi industry, but realistically, who's going to use this tool is probably more the people that have taken training, for instance, like you provide, or that other manufacturers or training partners provide, and that's really kind of the upper tier of the Wi-Fi expert community, and they oftentimes are in consultancy roles, and they need to drop in third-party information into their reports, and so wanted to make that as easy as possible.
And I noticed you also added some mesh in there. Was that for a specific project you're working on?
Yeah. So I've had a couple of projects where I've had to do some mesh work. It's obviously not the first choice for a network. Wired is always preferred, but you do get into situations where mesh is required, and it's really hard to plan around that because it's kind of just, even for a lot of Wi-Fi professionals, myself included, before I kind of tackled it, mesh performance, you knew throughput, you took a big hit, or capacity took a big hit as well, but you didn't really have any way to gauge that. So the mesh planning was more educational in nature, just for myself to work through it, as well as then to highlight it for other people, so that they know, well, if I'm looking at, what I'm looking at for performance degradation, 1, 2, 3 hops out, or planning a larger mesh network where maybe you have multiple root nodes. So I think a huge, target audience for the tool in general is just education to understand the concepts.
I like the tool from this standpoint. In fact, I tell in all of my classes, if you really want to understand how Wi-Fi works, especially airtime, go into Andrew's capacity planner and reverse engineer it. You lay out all of the math right in front. I love that. I mean, if you don't want to see it, you don't have to see it. You can just stay on the front page. But if you go back and walk through the calculations and you understand it, that's how you can really understand the airtime, by just looking at what you've already done. So thanks you kind of peeled back the covers and show us the math underneath.
Yeah, well, you're welcome. I mean, I try to strike that balance of providing all the information for those who want to go digging and understand it more deeply. But then hopefully on the main front page or main worksheet, just be able to simplify it if possible so that people can get value out of it without having to understand all the mechanics.
There is that other group of people out there who are just, cranking stuff out. The other thing I really appreciate is you always talk about it's an iterative process. It's not just go click a button, say this, you need 27 APs, install them, and you're done.
Right. Nothing is ever black and white in almost any facet of life. So, I was looking at.
I love the black and white things.
Yeah. Well, I was just looking at, how I design networks, and it's like, well, I've got this bag of tools that I use, and no one tool does everything, and you always have to look at one tool, look at what that's telling you, look at another tool, look at what that one's telling you, figure out what's going on between them, and make adjustments, and then and look at it again. So this is just one additional tool in hopefully somebody's tool bag that they can integrate into their process, and knowing that no one tool does everything for you, you're going to have some natural interplay between them. And so that's where I see capacity planning fitting in, as you have RF planning, you have all sorts of network integration planning, you have budgeting, you have capacity planning, and you have to roll everything through its cycles to come to a happy balance. Wi-Fi, I like to say, Wi-Fi is a multi-variable problem. You can't solve for one and expect all the others just to be okay. You have to solve for all of them at once, and that naturally lends to complexity and iteration.
So what's the difference between, on the new 2.0, you have two versions, one with 30 client rows and the other one without? Was that for a big project, or what was the reason behind that?
I got asked by several community members and customers and projects that, hey, 15 client rows is good, but sometimes, we run into these larger projects or things where I just need to put in some more information rather than having to try to do two separate plans and merge them together or something like that. So if you have a large plan or a large number of devices in your environment, and you are one of those types of people that loves to get very granular, you could do that, because you can put multiple applications on a device. So the 15 rows kind of limited. You could have 15 devices with an SLA for each one, or you could have, a couple of devices with a couple of different apps and try to mock up, background apps and things like that. So it's just, an option.
On that last statement you just made, if someone wants to be, say they're trying to model a Chromebook and it runs, video for 20 minutes a day and something, 3 or 4 different apps, what's your recommendation? Do you put each of the devices in separate application and then leave the same quantities there?
Actually, what I recommend most people doing is actually being much more simplified and just using generic device categories and SLA of what's a good user experience. So you could, go to the 10th degree and figure out all the applications that are being run on a device if you have a very controlled environment, or you just want to, learn how those things interact. But for most administrators, I say, just bucket it into, hey, I have Chromebooks, and what is somebody going to be doing as their primary function on this device most of the time, and what's an SLA that makes that end user happy or satisfied with the experience, and just put that in.
I like that simplified approach.
Right. I mean, usually I tell people, well, you have the generic device categories of, maybe you have 2 stream laptops, 3 stream laptops, 1 stream tablets and 2 stream tablets, and 1 stream smartphones and 2 stream smartphones, and those are your generic device categories. And what's a good user experience on each one in your environment? Knowing, maybe some of the applications that are running on those devices, maybe you just know some of the use cases without the applications, and so you can target, hey, I think, a 10 megabit per laptop would be a high but a pretty decent SLA for users that are doing heavy file sharing or collaborative work or something like that, and maybe 5 megabits for a laptop that is just more generic office use or something like that, and 2 to 4 megabits for a tablet, and maybe 500K to 1 megabit or 2 megabits for a smartphone, depending on your environment. And I find that gets you in the ballpark of 90% accuracy that will get you along the path that you need to be on.
Well, what happens if you, and this is from your experience, and I'm just going to set you up on this one, sorry.
I have a lot of customers who say, okay, I have this. They put it into the capacity planner. The planner comes back and drops out and says, you need 47 APs. And then they try to figure out how to make 47 APs work in their building.
Yeah, so an additional feature, just to preface the answer, is in the version 2, I tried to expose more. I know you're huge on frequency reuse, and rightly so. There's more frequency reuse requirements exposed in the tool. So if it spits out 47 APs, it might come out down and say in 5 gigahertz this requires 3 channel reuses. 3 reuses of every channel, and in 2.4 it requires 7 reuses of every channel, or something like that, right? And that's where the iterative process and integrating that with RF planning becomes very, very critical to success. If you have 7 channel reuses you need in your environment on 2.4 gigahertz, and you think through RF planning you can realistically only get 3, you've got a mismatch, right? You've got to either start getting more sophisticated on the RF side with directional antennas and restricting coverage or increasing attenuation somehow, or targeting coverage through directional antennas, or you need to start revising your capacity expectations with lower SLAs or higher capable devices, and you can get into all sorts of different tweaks you could do on that front as well. But at least then you're aware of the mismatch, and you need to merge the two somehow. And
if you have a big enough monitor while you're doing it, you can actually see them both at the same time and go up to the top, make a couple changes, look at the bottom. Oh, no, that didn't work. And kind of use the spreadsheet for that what-if analysis that it's really good for.
Yeah, one of the big things I found is, the question is still persistent out there of, what channel width should I use? And, if you have some idea of what client device types are in your environment, even from a protocol breakout standpoint, you can very quickly mock up, well, how does it change the number of radios I need if I have 20 versus 40 versus, God forbid, 80 megahertz that I'm trying to deploy? You can quickly see if it's going to dramatically reduce the number of radios you need or not. And more often than not, it has some benefit, but not nearly as much as the amount of additional frequency you're taking up for the wider channels. So you can quickly mock up and say, well, if I did 40 megahertz instead, maybe I have a 10% reduction in radios, but with the channel reuse still required that's fairly high, and using the wider channels, it doesn't make sense, or something like that, right?
The other thing I like using it for, because once you delve in and you get into the math, and I'm a spreadsheet guy from a long way back, and once you trust the math that's underneath, and I obviously trust yours on this, you can do all sorts of crazy things like change the access point from a wave 1 to a wave 2, or an N to an AC, and see what the difference is there, versus changing the clients and see when the actual numerical number. If we upgrade our clients, we need fewer APs. If we upgrade our APs, it doesn't make any difference.
Yeah,
and give some numbers back to your customer to say, this is where you should be putting your money, or not. But you have some data to support it.
Absolutely, because one of the biggest things that I found as well is a lot of customers or environments, they always focus on the infrastructure and the access points. If I just buy a better AP, I'll have a better network. And one thing that really hasn't been communicated or educated enough throughout the industry and throughout the customer base is that, hey, it takes 2 to tango, right? And performance on a network is the combination of both the access point and the client and how they interact. And hopefully through the tool, it can educate people to understand the client impact on capacity in a network. If we have a 1.3 gigabit capable access point on the marketing, but if I throw in a whole bunch of smartphones, why am I only getting 1 to 200 megabits max through an AP? Well, there's a definite reason for that, and that's client impact as a big part of that.
And if someone takes the time and reverse engineers what you've done, it's again a great learning experience. I know you got a hard stop here in a couple minutes. I just have another comment I wanted to make, and then another question. Your capacity planner user guide was like 40, 50 pages long, very detailed, very well written. If anyone's going to be using this, don't just jump right in. I would suggest get the user guide up and read through it. It's a great learning experience. It's still on 1.0. You're going to have an update to this to the 2.0?
Yeah, I've been slowly working on updating that. I think a lot of the, the main concepts are still there. I just need to update, as part of the user guide walks through using the main worksheet. So I just need to go through and update some of that and add in the new features that are in version 2. Unfortunately, didn't have time to really update that because it's kind of just a side project in my free time. And
you got a lot of free time with those kids there, huh?
I was about to say, as community members may or may not know, I've had an explosion in children, so my free time.
It kind of went exponential there for a little bit, huh?
Yeah, from 1 to 3, and I'm like,
So the next one's going to be triplets?
Yeah, there's no plan for any more at this point, so we'll see.
I'm impressed that you even had enough to say the word free time.
Yeah. It's mainly, while I'm eating lunch or late at night after everybody's gone to bed.
Well, you've done a great service to the community to put this together and share it and leave it so open. I mean, this could have been an application that, just the application just punches in some numbers and all the work happens behind the scenes. By showing exactly how it works, you've allowed everyone to learn from it. So thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. I just felt there was a glaring gap in the industry of, all these rules of thumb about capacity out there, whether it's based on fundamentally a coverage metric of how many square feet per AP, which, I won't go into the details, but I don't believe in that. I mean, you can get to a roundabout close enough solution, but you're kind of still putting your finger in the wind and hoping that it works out. Or you can get, generic assumptions about users per AP. Again, all of these are just rules of thumb, and they break down so often that I was like, we need a better way. And really, I tried to tackle that myself, and the capacity planner was kind of just an outgrowth of my thinking through that, and how can I get better at it.
Well, I like it that its core premise is it's all about the airtime. That's the only thing we have. When you put in a better AP, it's a more efficient user of that airtime, and when you put in a better client, it also does it, and it's all about trying to make the airtime work.
Right. And I usually say that, I know one of your big mantras is frequency reuse is everything. And I take a little bit different view on that. I think that I take a dual-pronged approach. Airtime is everything. And there are two forms of airtime. There's airtime within a cell and airtime between or shared between cells. So if you can, the capacity planner might help you.
I agree with you on that as well. It's just really hard to display.
Yeah. So the capacity planner, if you can think of it as one side of that coin, is trying to understand airtime within cells and how loaded up you can get them before you have to create another cell that's on a different frequency. And then if you iterate with that again with RF planning to understand frequency reuse between cells, that's the other half of the coin. So the two are, I think, part and parcel the same thing, but again, just different perspectives on it.
Good. Well, one last question, and I'll let you go. What keeps you up at night? Not other than your kids. Thinking about Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi right now, probably because of my career path at this point and the position I'm in right now is more thinking about market trends and where the market is going from a growth standpoint. I think we've had undeniable growth in consumer and enterprise Wi-Fi that is so pervasive now. Like the conversation shifting not from how do we get more Wi-Fi out there or what's the latest speeds and feeds that we can market. I think the industry is fundamentally at a turning point of now that all this Wi-Fi is out there, there's a lot of it out there that's still bad. How do we go through and fix that as an industry? How do we get pervasive Wi-Fi that works well, not just pervasive Wi-Fi for the sake of Wi-Fi? So I'm spending a lot of time thinking about those network administrators who don't know Wi-Fi, or Wi-Fi is just another thing that was put on their plate and they specialize in something else that may not even be IT or technology related. How do we get Wi-Fi that works for them? So I think there's a lot of good trends from it's people and technology that have to make that happen. So technology side, we're looking at machine learning and AI and big data and how we use that. So that's something that's very interesting. And then on the people side, we're looking at, I think, a growth in managed service provider Wi-Fi. We're looking at huge growths in things of that nature. So I'm spending a lot of time thinking through that.
Well, when you're up in the middle of the night with the kids, that's a good thing to be spending your time on. and we all appreciate when you come up with those. Well, thanks for your time, Andrew. How can someone find you on social media and your website?
Sure. So my website is revolutionwifi.net, and you can find me on Twitter at revolutionwifi.
Thank you very much.
appreciate the time.
Divergent Dynamics with Devin Aiken.
Today we're going to talk about legacy data rates. If you've ever had a problem with 11N and 11AC clients connecting only at legacy data rates, this segment is for you. Legacy data rates include 1, 2, 5.5, and 11 megabits, which are called DSSS and HRDSSS rates. Legacy data rates also include 6, 9, 12, 18, 24, 36, 48, and 54 megabits per second, which are called OFDM rates. All other rates are called MCS rates, which stands for modulation and coding scheme rates. They can be found at mcsindex.com. When you use WEP or TKIP or Auto for your Cipher suite, when configuring your controller or management system or autonomous APs, then you're limited to using legacy data rates with a maximum data rate of 54 megabits per second. When you disable wireless multimedia or WMM in your configuration settings, then you're likewise limited to using legacy data rates with a maximum data rate of 54 megabits per second. In systems that do not have support for 11B clients, I disable all data rates below 24 megabits per second. Then I configure 24 megabits per second as basic and supported, and 36, 48, and 54 as just supported. I call this configuration using 24 megabits per second as your minimum basic rate, or MBR. If the APs are sparsely located in the design, then I will make 12 megabits per second my minimum basic rate instead, with 18 and 24 megabits per second supported. If 11B client support is mandatory, then I will configure 11 megabits per second as my minimum basic rate on 2.4 gig, but still configure 24 megabit per second as my minimum basic rate on 5 gig. Disabling lower legacy data rates will conserve a huge amount of airtime due to beacons and probe responses, and will decrease the interference range of a basic service set. It will also help with client roaming and reduce sticky client behavior. You can check out more about this topic on my blog at divdyn.com, divdyn.com. Thank you.
10 Talks.
So yeah, hello. My name is Donal. Technically, I'm just going to do 10 slides. I'm very glad to be back in WLPC, but one of my problems is I'm quite grumpy with the state of hiring in our industry and also in many other industries. So the title of my talk is Verifying Candidates' Wireless Skills. Now, I don't have all the answers for this, so this is kind of like a work in progress where I'm actually going to canvass some feedback from everyone here. Okay, so 5 quick topics, a quick intro. I'm going to describe the problem as I see it. Again, this is just my opinion. The history of the problem as I see it, or as I've experienced it. I had an idea. It's nothing totally innovative or new, but I decided to go out and basically build something, design something. I'm going to demo it if I have time, and I'd like to leave a little bit of time just to do some questions or suggestions. So you can find me on Twitter as IRL Dexter, but does anyone know what this animal is? The honey badger. I didn't think so many people would know it. So the honey badger is fearless, and one of the things that I decided I was going to try and do was be fearless and pivot quite far down the road in my career into web development. So I've actually spent the last 4 months, I quit my job in April, delved into web app development. I've been building something out in Ruby on Rails, which is probably a nice MVC framework or model view controller framework to get stuck into to solve the problem that I was having. So what is the problem? So again, my opinion, as I see it, hiring itself is a very expensive endeavor. Especially when you get it wrong. A lot of the time, if you're dealing with either third parties or even in-house, screening, filtering, and sorting applicants to candidates is very time-consuming. It's expensive in other people's time. It's expensive in terms of resources. And recruiting itself is actually subject to a huge amount of bias based upon the people who are doing it. Certification is great, but what is it actually proof of It's point in time proof of something. What is that something? And few organizations that I've dealt with will actually test or assess people's skills, be it via labs or simulations, and a lot of it is just done via questions or relationships, whiteboarding if you're lucky. So that's kind of like the high-level problem. My history, I've been in quite a few roles in quite a few organizations. I've also built teams and built communities, and, you know, been involved in mentoring, been involved in training. So I kind of did a very sort of short excerpt here of my background. But one of the things is I've kind of played a little bit in everything from multinationals to telcos. I've been in sort of service providers, you know, system integrators. I've also been a business owner. So I've kind of been involved in both hiring and interviewing people, but also I've been interviewed and or luckily hired in quite a few scenarios. Only ever once in about 15 plus years have I been given a lab to do before I actually got the job to validate my skills. Only once have I ever had a psychometric test, and that was for a bank. I passed and did get the job, so everyone's safe. So my idea, again, is nothing new, but I actually wanted applicants. I wanted to get from applicants to candidates faster and better. And this idea of simulation-based hiring, I actually wanted people to demonstrate their skills at a point in time. I didn't want to have to, like, you know, elicit answers or ask them technical questions. I also wanted a multidisciplinary approach. One of the things you're going to find, obviously, we've spoken today about the wired network. We've spoken about wireless networks. I mean, hey, give me a generalist. I want someone that can do BGP, DNS. I want someone who understands, you know, 802.11. I want someone who does X, Y, and Z. But not a lot of people or not a lot of systems are able to actually test for that. Or another problem that people have is you may not actually have the skills in-house. So it's very hard to hire for skills that you don't have because you don't know what you're hiring for. So a lot of the time, people will go out to, say, recruitment agencies and use them as sourcers, but they don't have the skills themselves. So maybe it's a little bit selfish, but I kind of just want to sit down with people and assess them on their soft skills, their communication, their collaboration. I love doing whiteboarding with people, you know, doing designs. You can tell a lot about their presentation skills and how they communicate. I didn't want to have to go back and test people's hard skills. Like, to me, it's a given. Like, you shouldn't be talking to me or talking to my team or talking to us if you don't have the requisite skill set. So our time is expensive. Let me tell you about designs. Delving into web development, I should have a laser pointer or something. I'm probably going to break the rule here. But I decided if I was going to build something out as a web app, I guess as an engineer and architect, I was going to build something that would scale. So everything from CDNs on the front end to a development environment and a prod environment, to database choice, to labs on the back end. I decided to build a platform, and then I suddenly realized the platform was going to be aimed at clients. There needed to be an applicant or a practitioner environment, and there needed to be an admin environment. I built out sort of dev, prod, back-end labs, and this is what I'm going to show you a little bit of. One of the nice things is there's so much virtualization going on that you can virtualize a lot of infrastructure and architecture into labs. You can also make heterogeneous labs where you've got multiple different vendors or multiple different environments that you can then test different skills on. I'm just looking at the timer. It's going pretty fast. Okay, so one of the things I realized very quickly was it's quite easy to virtualize a lot of the wired stuff, be it like iOS, Juni stuff, be it Cumulus. You can even virtualize Cisco wireless controllers. But how do you do it for lots and lots of wireless clients? You can't just bypass the physics. Like, you've got to bring RF back into the equation somehow. Involved in building out, you know, data models. Everything in green I've kind of built thus far, but it's still a work in progress. People talk about full stack engineers. I suddenly realized I had to do a lot of design. I wanted to do some of the stuff myself so that I could then knew what I was going to do in terms of hiring contractors. I didn't want to be one of those people that, you know, had the wool pulled over their eyes. So I decided I was going to just copy the infrastructure as a service provider's UI, but realized that that was expensive to do in terms of customizing all the things. So use frameworks and customize, and let's have a very quick look at what it is I'm actually talking about. Hopefully, so I didn't realize we were going to be VGA in a small res screen, so I'm lucky that Bootstrap has kind of reorientated some of the stuff. So this is like a client environment or client interface, which would be for recruiters or internal hiring teams. Basically, you have a requisition or you have like a job description, which you would set up. You could be hiring for an internal company if you're an internal team, or you could be hiring for an external company if you're a recruiter. And the idea was to abstract some of the classifications or categorizations into the system so that you could categorize the role, number one. You could also put in the position description, and basic skills matching is not a very, very hard thing to do. But when you get into things like simulations, or what I call simulations, I really just wanted a recruiter or recruiting team to be able to sort of drag and drop skills into desirable skills, or let's take something, jokingly, empathy, into fundamental skills. So I can't test yet for soft skills or psychometrics. It's still a hard skills platform. But the idea was that your hiring team just had to know the skill sets that were required. They'd also be time boxed. You would then send out this essentially lab or assessment to the applicants, and they would then complete within a certain time frame, and you would have you would score them or you would assess them based upon the skills. So this is still a work in progress. This is kind of like one interface, which would be for the client side. Let me just go back a second. Keep going. I'm just going to show you the admin environment very, very quickly. I'm still working on the front-end applicant or practitioner-based environment. But the idea would be to actually be able to go and connect into an environment, which would be a console. Let me come back to one of the existing questions, actually. Okay, I'm actually having an issue with WebSockets, but this is what happens when you've got a work in progress. You basically write a question and then you have a multiple choice environment, but you actually console into a lab or into a virtual lab and real time have to interrogate the lab for the answer to the question that you were having. There's other platforms out there that can kind of do this in terms of codes. Things like HackerRank is one of them. I don't know if you're aware of HackerRank, but it's very specifically for software. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to build this for infrastructure that has more deterministic outcomes in terms of questions and answers. So one of the things I would throw out there to the community would be if you were testing for a wireless skill set, apart from going into a controller and looking at the config elements or asking someone to pull out stanzas of code or, IPs or settings, how would you test for a large-scale simulation or an environment? Maybe you could do packet captures. Maybe you could term serve into a remote desktop. But yeah, I'm going to leave you with that concept, or that question is, how would you test wireless at scale? Which is kind of comes back to the earlier question around testing and validation, but more so from a skills perspective. So that's almost it. Let me just go back to the beginning of the Prezzo. I think I'm over by about a minute or so. So I'm just going to throw it out to you. If you don't have time to maybe come chat to me at some point in time, or maybe email feedback at candidate. Has anyone got any questions, or how would you like to test a potential new recruit?
Is there a way you could have a whiteboard that you'd normally simulate with a one-on-one conversation and have all the parts and have them just rearrange them into a working network?
Yeah, pretty easy, I think, with Canvas and just some different in the DOM and some different elements. So you mean like an already represented network where you're dragging and dropping shapes that represent different things?
I would like to watch them do it.
Yeah. So you could record that and play it back.
Record that to see what's their thought process. That's what you do when you're live.
Yep.
But you could
capture that process and then let me watch how did they build a structure first before they drug the pieces over, or was it random? How'd they do that?
Yeah, so you do like a 30-second abstracted whiteboard, ask a question, and then record that and play it back. Yeah.
Wireless LAN terminology.
ACI, or adjacent channel interference. This is a performance condition that occurs when two or more access point radios are providing RF coverage to the same physical area using overlapping frequencies. Simultaneous RF transmissions by two or more of these access point radios in the same physical area can result in corrupted 802.11 frames due to the frequency overlap. Corrupted 802.11 frames cause retransmissions, which result in both throughput degradation and added latency.
Well, you made it to the end of another episode 107 of Wireless LAN Professionals podcast. Thanks for listening in. We covered Karol Krol on AirMobile. Also learned from Andrew Vanage about his Capacity Planner 2.0, plus a 10 talk from Donal on verifying wireless skills of your candidates.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Wireless LAN Professionals podcast, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Wireless LAN Pros for all the latest news and updates, and also connect directly with Keith on Twitter at Keith R. Parsons. Head over to www.wlanpros.com for this episode's show notes, as well as the latest in all things Wi-Fi.